Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is going to be Sunday over here. It's the thing where on Sunday I just take a walk and I get the newspaper over wherever I am. I'm in Nairobi, Kenya right now. I'll get the newspaper and I'll read the headlines and kind of let you know my thoughts and what's happening around there. Sometimes some of the stories I'd have known about because it's things that are ongoing in the area. Sometimes it's just things I have no idea about and I find interesting. And during this process, if there's actual articles in this that you want me to go further into, please let me know in the comment section below. This time I'm going to do the Sunday Standard, which is just one newspaper. In the past, I've been doing two different newspapers and reading the headlines. And this one, I'm going to try something new and actually just go in and read the main headlines and just flip through the entire magazine, entire newspaper, to let you guys see kind of the different headlines and different storylines and different things that are going on here in Nairobi, Kenya, at least according to the Standard, or at least that according to the people who are editing and reporting for the Sunday Standard found to be newsworthy. Let's see if there's a lot of flip bait. Is it flip bait or read bait? What is it when it's in a newspaper? Clickbait online when a title's like, oh, you got to click it. And the cover of this was a bit clickbaity, and I was like, okay, I think this might be an article I get into, but actually, let me just get to the paper right now. So here we go. Here's a newspaper. I'm going to go with the Standard. This is one of the two leading newspapers in Kenya. I've gone over the Daily Nation or the Nation newspaper and other ones where I had the Sunday Nation and the Sunday Standard. But this time I'm going to go with the Standard. This title really got me. The other one had a few other things on there, stuff to do with politics and things like that. I was like, okay, enough politics. This is also kind of politics, but it's taking a different take on it. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to go into this. So let's just go with this headline. The Mumbi daughters. Women on the rise. A new crop of young women leaders emerge in Central to defy stereotypes and controversy by boldly taking on issues affecting their people and threatening to eclipse their male counterparts in an interesting political trend. Now, Mumbi, I think that might be a certain term having to do with the Kikuyu tribe. And the Kikuyu tribe is in central Kenya. And you can see from the names of these women, right here, Purity Wangui Ngirichich, Martha Wangari Gilgil, Anne Waigiru Kinyaga governor. Okay, so sorry, Ngirichich is the area that they're in. Gilgil MP is where she's a member of parliament from. Kinyagi governor is her title. So I'm sorry, I didn't see the little comma there. Or this one, Ngirichich might be actually the location or might be actually the name. Maybe they just did a problem with not putting the comma. But anyway, Gathoni Wamuchomba, Kiambu woman representative, Alice Wahome Kandara MP, and Sabrina Chege Muranga women representative. So this some of these people, I think Miss Machumba here and Miss Chege here, they were in one article that I discussed previously. It was on this Sunday thing. I found it where there was some conman who went in there and was conning different members of different female politicians. And you can go back and check out that video. But I think they were involved in here. But to see them coming back in a different light here, kind of good for them. And then right here you see number of elected women legislators in Kiambu, Muranga, Kirinyaga, Nyeri, Nyandarua, Nakuru, Laikipia, and Nairobi counties. So central is central Kenya, of course, the central region. That's where also the capital Nairobi is, in the central part of Nairobi, Kenya. Now, this is just a take on, with Kenya, they have female representatives. They have a situation like you can see here. She was the Kiambu woman representative, Muranga County women representative, and they also have a gender quota. In certain positions, they have 1/3 expectation that 1/3 of the positions, and like for example in cabinet, 1/3 of the positions need to be filled by women. This is in the constitution of Kenya. I know it can be amended and things like that. And I think the previous administration of Uhuru Kenyatta did not meet that on the in the cabinet, like the cabinet ministers and the cabinet advisory board for the president. There were some complaints towards that. I have general complaints in general of these quota systems, because if you have some really good candidates who you happen to have gotten, let's say you have a situation where there's 30 positions, 10 of them have to be women. You get to a situation where there's 25 very qualified males. You have to boot out 5 males just because you need to match this 10. It doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, so you have that kind of situation, but this whole idea that Africa in general, at least Kenya in general from my experience, is this patriarchy that's very anti-woman, has gone completely against what I've actually seen. If anything, I think African communities are very matriarchal. part of the fact that when African communities don't have as much civilization, they're not as much technologically advanced, and when you're in that situation, you go closer to your biology. And when you come to your biology, you are in a situation where you have gynocentric societies. If you aren't gynocentric as a peoples, and you don't put interest in what the female wants, who's the deciding factor in reproduction, your society will crumble if you don't care for the females. Now, this has something to do with languages, different definitions, the way people act in different ways, is you can't necessarily tell how somebody's being treated in one culture may seem like it's negative compared to your culture, but that's how they treat that person in that culture. But it's the same biology, we're the same human species, and we have the same sexual dimorphism, and we have the same limitations to our reproduction. So in general, the way I think females are treated in other countries may not, from the offset, from just what you look at it, you may think, oh wow, they're mistreating females there. But then one thing to do, look at how the males in general are treated. Are the males treated a lot better? Is the quality of life for males a lot higher? Let's say you're in a country and you're like, okay, look, I'm a woman, I'm a male in the West, in, let's say, France, and I'm looking at how people are treated in Sierra Leone. The women are treated a horrible way, that's horrible. Then you think, we have to do something about that. Look at the women in our country versus their women. And then you look at the men and say, okay, look at the men in our country versus their men. Would I, as a man from France, want to move to Sierra Leone and be treated like the males there in general? In most cases, you will find the males are treated just as bad comparatively to how you think the women in your country are treated. But since in general, as a human species, we care more about females, what's happening to the females is going to stick out more as what's happening to the men. And the simple thing on that, when you look at the international movement against child genital mutilation, they focus on female genital mutilation and not male genital mutilation. Okay, that's taking aside. But this is kind of showing how, even here the Mumbi doctors are talking about new crop of young women leaders that emerge in Central. It's just women used to lead from different positions. That whole thing like, oh, behind every strong man is a strong woman. And that's a very positive thing. A lot of men are very high achievers and do a lot in their life because they're secure, because they found a woman who allowed them to reproduce, and then once they reproduced, they had those children that gave those men extra boost to achieve more and supply for that woman and for those children and do all these things. So they led in that kind of way. They had that kind of power in that different way. And that saying, I do agree with it. Another saying I think we should include also is behind every evil man, there's also normally an evil woman who's accepted him to do that thing. If you have a certain society where the women decide going around and stealing from people and selling drugs and shooting people is not going to get you access to reproduction, those men will stop doing that. You find that kind of situation where you have certain neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods, a lot of drugs and things like that. Those males doing that are still getting access to women. So they'll keep doing that. They'll still getting to reproduce and things like that. If those women in those cultures, for some reason, were just like, no, we're going to stop doing it. But in general, those women are also like, hey, here comes resources from these males. So there's a mixed up thing in there, and I think that's something to kind of think of when you look at these things. Okay, so the cover thing, meet our new columnists. The Sunday Standard prides itself in a tradition of boldness, and today we unveil Maina Kiai and George Kegoro, our new authoritative equal rights and democracy advocates who join our panel of distinguished columnists to tell it how it is every Sunday. So op-eds on pages 14 and 18. I'm going to jump to 14 and 18 and kind of see what they're writing. This is kind of the new thing I want to kind of go through and let you guys see also the interiors of these and see the different things that are going on here in Nairobi, Kenya. So 14, Keith Alonso, I don't know, the editorials. So the editorials are in here. I already forgot the names of these guys. Maina Kiai. So the Maina Kiai fix the IEBC to avoid being the laughing stock during elections. That's the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So I was saying that wrong when I was talking about before, but this is the kind of thing that's the kind of group that's in charge of the election process here in Nairobi, Kenya. It kind of says, okay, these are the counties. It's kind of the thing that's involved in gerrymandering, not gerrymandering. What's that thing where I'm forgetting the actual term of it, where they actually change the borders of different counties and stuff and say, okay, this is who's going to vote for this congressperson in the United States of America. It's not gerrymandering. It might be gerrymandering, actually. I might look it up, and it's not too important. But anyway, they're the ones they're the ones who say, okay, this county is going to have this many people, this region, and then they plan the whole thing. They plan how the votes are counted, how the things are shipped, the system, and things like that. So they're very important when it comes to Kenya's elections. Let's see, what is the other guy's name? George Kigoro. So let's see what Mr. Kigoro said on his article here. It's just a matter of time. Uhuru and Ruto suffer a nasty divorce. So Uhuru is the president of Kenya and Ruto is the deputy president. Now, I've had in a couple of these talks been talking about the situation that happened with President Uhuru Kenyatta had a handshake with the main opposition leader, Raila Odinga. And since then, that's about 6 weeks ago. Since then, there's been different things happening with the partnership between Uhuru, who is from the Kikuyu tribe, and Ruto, who is from the Kalenjin tribe. And Raila Odinga is from the Luo tribe, and he has a lot of backers in the Western Kenya region of the Luo tribe and other tribes from there. Or clans. I don't know if they call them tribes or clans, but I just did a recent video talking about how there's clans, and then the Luya clan, which my ancestors are from the Luya clan. They're divided into 17 different tribes, but yet now there's a dissolution of that term, and they call it in general tribes now. They'll say all the Luya tribe instead of clans, because I think there's also been intermarriage and things like that within those separate tribes. So you won't just be like, oh, this is Bukusu and this is something else. But anyway, so this is a situation where now people are wondering what's going to happen with President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition leader Raila Odinga. That handshake, that meeting occurred without anybody on either side knowing what was going on. So Ruto himself is also now wondering, he wants to be president after Uhuru Kenyatta in 4 or 5 years. So now he's wondering, if Raila gets into power, into a position, to a good position with Uhuru, is he going to kind of sneak in, or is he going to position himself to become president after Uhuru Kenyatta, or is it going to be Ruto's turn? So there's an issue, and there might be some situations going on with that. Let's come back to the cover, and then we'll zoom back in. As Uhuru Care takes off, will it succeed? Universal health. With Uhuru moving to secure his legacy under the Big Four agenda, healthcare is increasingly becoming his pet project. We explore what it will take and look at lessons of universal healthcare from beyond. Horrible idea, horrible idea. In Kenya, we have a situation where they have these things called shamas, and these different kind of cultural communities and meetings where people come together. If somebody gets an injury, if somebody gets hurt, for example, I had some situation in my relatives where somebody's had a child that was born had a situation. They kind of came together. They needed to go get some medical care outside of the country. People came together, and people from the workplace, friends, family, relatives. They came together and changad money, which is just putting money together, raised money, and then they tried to get this child out there. The child unfortunately passed before the time happened for them to actually go out there. But that's how they do these kind of insurance things. The setup of insurance isn't really that set up here. Now, universal healthcare in general, access to health care facilities is not the same as having access to people being healed. If you go to Cuba, they have universal health care. They have access to it, but does not necessarily talk about the actual quality of the health. You have situations where they're talking about Cuba, they're actually shipping in doctors from Cuba here to Kenya, and you have a lot of Kenyan doctors, some Kenyan doctors' unions complaining about that and saying, why are you doing this? Just because the setup here is completely messed up. And this Uhuru Care is a play on the Obamacare thing. So I'm hoping this is not a situation where they try to roll this in because taxes are going to increase. A lot of the population in Kenya is untaxed because they have just money. First of all, they're making very low amounts of actual money. There's still, in the countryside, in the rural areas, there's still a lot of barter kind of done that way. Well, I remember like when we used to go home and visit the people in the countryside, the grandparents and things like that, they would appreciate more that you go and you give them a chicken versus giving them some money. Because with a chicken, they can see that like, yeah, I can have eggs with this, I can reproduce with this chicken, or I can eat this chicken now, versus the money is still in a different situation. So there's also a big informal market here in Nairobi, in Kenya in general. But now they're trying to institute a situation where they have more registered businesses, and I don't think it's for protection of the businesses. It's more for taxation abilities and setting up things like universal healthcare. I think that will be a bad idea, and we'll see how that will happen. So how Kenyans were played in the shilling 1.5 billion National Youth Service loot. So after more than Shilling 2 billion in taxpayers' money was stolen in the National Youth Service. One would expect that the culprit was found and punished, but alas. So same thing happens. Different people, different country, same human beings. Different country, same state, same government apparatus. If you have that kind of tool, the people who are willing to use it for negative reasons are going to be attracted to it and actually do it, and you see that happening. So yes, this same national government that's in charge of the National Youth Service stealing this amount is going to be in charge of this universal healthcare and will steal the same amount. You're going to see that happen. That's almost a guarantee. So Sunday, Mary Wambui speaks. Controversial former member of parliament for Odaya talks about going back to school, living her best life, and her marriage. So you see here, they're talking about, oh yes, we have these new daughters coming up, but then, okay, controversial, older, they've already been there. Women have already been in power. But they have this thing where you come up and it's like, oh, well, yeah, we have these things coming up. I was just listening to this news story about some old basketball player or something was being talked about the past, and then there was a game he was talking about, and he was like, yeah, we had the first two black coaches at this and this, and then he was just like, yeah, but nobody really cared. They were just good coaches. And this kind of situation, when you have this situation where it's like, oh, we have to focus that they're females, rah rah rah, girl power, woman power, nah. If they're good, they're good. If they're bad, they're bad. Just focus on that. So let's just go in and Sonko's new antics keep friend and foe guessing. So Mike Sonko is not, this guy. Mike Sonko is he's the governor of Nairobi. He's this really interesting politician. He's a very flamboyant. It's like kind of it's something I think about capital cities can have really, because what's his name, Boris something from London was very. I think he at least his appearance-wise, was very awkward, very odd, off the key. But with Mike Sonko, he wears earrings. Sometimes he wears gold and bling bling. He's more like a hip-hop kind of generation, I'd say. He's very popular with the youth in the slum areas. There's suspicions of him having some connections with some of the organized crime in the country. I'm laughing here, but Mike Sonko could be a very dangerous man, or could be just a very flamboyant man. But there's issues about him. People just wondering. He's one, like, I think, the younger kind of politicians in there. And he's an interesting character. If you guys want to just look up, just do an internet search for Mike Sonko. You'll find some rather interesting stories about him. So tributes of Daphne, friend of Jumbo. So that's a friend of elephants and things like that. High parking charges. So this is just kind of what you see. Jose Uhuru Care. Improve healthcare? No, it will not. But then these kind of questions also where it's like, okay, in a country where there isn't anything before, is it going to be a situation where you start this and it's going to be good? So I have this strange life where I see things in Nairobi, Kenya that are not existing in other countries, and then there's things in other countries where they're kind of rolling back, like the United States of America where I've lived. They're kind of looking back and saying, okay, we could do this. And it's something I thought of when I was very young. Why are developing countries doing things that failed already, that didn't work, have been shown not to work in the developed countries, and they're trying to do that again? And then one thing I've noticed now is why are developed countries rolling back big amounts of the population, rolling back, and they can't just look at the developing countries and see how much it's failing there. I mean, we have these examples, learn from each other, but no. So a few African countries with universal healthcare. So there's some there, and I think it should remain a few and go to none. So let's see if there's any more interesting things here. Raila in South Africa for Winnie's burial. This is Winnie Mandela's burial. Winnie Mandela and Nelson Mandela were rabid communists. Did some very horrible things. I know they were involved in the breaking of the apartheid movement, where they had that racist kind of state. Another thing with the apartheid movement, people were wondering about minimum wage and things like that, unionization. That was started in the apartheid times, where the white South Africans did not want to be outcompeted by the local black population that was willing to work for less. So they initiated a minimum wage. So it was a situation where it's like, okay, this person doesn't have that many skills, but they're willing to work for less and I can train them. But unless this person can bring me $10 worth of revenue, I'm not going to hire this person. So they say, let's have a $10 minimum wage. And in that way, you have to hire the people who are bringing you back $11, $12 in profits that you can actually afford to actually pay them. So this way, you limited people from actually entering the market. And that's one thing that started in South Africa. Another thing that was very popular in South Africa was this thing of putting a tire around somebody's neck, dousing that tire with gasoline, filling the inside of the tire with gasoline, and lighting it. that was something Winnie Mandela was actually very infamous for having played a part in. So you need to double check and see these people and this whole thing, like people being celebrated after they've died, that we just kind of ignore what they said. And I was talking about Cuba before, the reaction of Fidel Castro after, really some disgusting things when you look at some of these things. Memory of Mount Kenya was then sold for 20 goats and beads. What? So Mount Kenya is a snow-capped mountain here in Kenya. These stories of 20 goats and beads, it's kind of, I think, a similar story, how they're like, what's it called? The island of Manhattan was sold for like some for a necklace and some blankets or something by the Native Americans that lived there. And also, are those people really natives? I've been listening to some really cool stories, re-listening to some of these stuff about the I'm forgetting what this thing was called. This thing about 20,000 years ago, where North America was covered with these with a 2-mile high glacier of ice, and some asteroid or some pieces of a comet came in and hit the planet, and then there was a flash flood by the melting of that, and then that wiped out the civilizations that possibly existed before then, and the peoples that were living in North America, and then later other people came in. So the natives who were there might have been like a secondary thing that came in after. They could have been people there previously. Really amazing stuff out there about history. But think about how little we know about history. This whole 20 goats and beads thing. Even that story about in North America about New York, I don't think that's actually a true story. I don't know how true this story is, but we know so little about history. And also there was something that's different. Here, when you have a situation, in a lot of these things, that sale might have been made, but people had a different idea of possessions. They were kind of a situation where like, yes, I don't own this for good. I kind of keep this. I own this, I can sell this to you for 10 years or something, then I'll come back and use it. Because I think they had more of an idea where people were more pastoral. They'd move around more and be like, we're not using this right now, so we'll do this exchange now. But as I said before, if there's an article here that you guys like, that you want me to go deeper into, let me know. Right here. Worrying statistics. Rising gay numbers alarm Nyanza. So I was talking about before, I think it was a previous one here, where it was like, okay, being gay is not really too big of a deal here, but in some places it is. Men Against AIDS youth organizations exclusively serves gays and lesbians whose numbers are increasing. Then here, worrying statistics. Homosexuals in Kisumu are mostly infected by HIV and age between 18 and 35. So when you're talking about activism within the homosexual community all around the world, I think there's a very low actual... Comparatively to other issues they go over, the actual focus on AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases, I think, is unfortunately low. And I think here, if that's the alarm for it, because it seems to be mostly they're talking about the actual infection rates. You see, they're talking about here, majority, some are married with children. So you have a situation where people are kind of in the closet with it, and it's not as openly done here. But yeah, that's just kind of an interesting story there. Tale of bungled probe wrong in the Northern News Service. So this is kind of a situation where there's also articles. I have a relative that actually does some of these political cartoons. So 2002, Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons. Today, Assad has chemical weapons. So yeah, they lied before and they lie again. They're also skipping some presidents in the middle there. Who are they skipping? Kenya's favorite son, Barack Obama, because Barack Obama did continue the bombing in the Middle East, and America has been at war for entirely too long. I have some support for Trump, but I am very disappointed with what's happened with this. I have hopes that there's actual other things that are coming out of this, that there's reasons for him to do this. Maybe there's information, as I said, as a president that I don't know, but I don't understand that whole thing. People are saying, yes, at least he's protecting them. The red line that Obama set up, he actually enforced it. But the people who are supporting it and the reasons they're giving, I'm very suspicious of it. I don't think, as I mentioned in the video where I talked about it, I don't think Assad is insane, and I think it would be an insane thing to hear that, yes, they're moving out, and then now we're going to do this, and then bring them back in. Literally 2 or 3 days, I think it was 2 days after Trump said he was moving people out, he says this, and then why? Anyway, so Kim will play Trump on nuclear arms, so they're talking about the meeting coming up with North Korea, and see, that's the thing that I was thinking. Maybe there's a thing where that meeting with North Korea showing strength in Syria is going to put him in a position where he has more leverage over North Korea. I don't know. So, yeah. So, Nogadoni, please let's shelve polygamy. So, yes, here's another thing I think. This is a good thing. Polygamy and poverty do not go hand in hand. For the man, make sure you have the wherewithal to meet the needs of the various homesteads. This kind of situation, in the past, polygamy was a situation where if you could afford multiple wives, you could have as many wives as you wanted. You normally had to get permission of the first wife and such a kind of thing, but they wouldn't live in the same house. You would have like a certain compound. Let's say this page is a compound. Your first wife's house would be here. Second wife would get a house here. Third wife would get a house here. And you had to support all of them in their own households. And in that kind of situation, you had this kind of bottleneck where in the past, when this was more common, let's say you had 100 men and 200 women, 100 men and 100 women in that community, 5 or 10 men would have enough resources to marry 30 women. So you'd have those 30 women, then maybe you'd have 20 more men would have some resources to marry maybe another 20 women. And you'd have a situation where 30 men would be married to, what's the numbers there that they said? 50 women. So you'd have the situation where 50 women would reproduce to the next generation, but only 30 men would actually do that. If that makes any sense. Only 20 men would actually do that. My math was off there. So the 10 men marrying 3 women each, 10 men marrying 1 woman each. 20 men marrying 1 woman each. So you'd have 30 men reproducing their genes and 50 women getting to reproduce their genes. So that's kind of a situation where in the past, polygamy actually has benefited females in a different way. That's the kind of thing I was talking about before, where look at certain situations and look, if you take out reproduction as the main point of what people are doing, it's a lot harder to understand what things are, and you can get things either muddled up. And I think that's one thing that happens in more developed countries, is there's a lot more other intricacies to the things, but when it comes down to it, it's still how can me as a female get as many resources as possible to reproduce, and the man is how can I as a male secure enough resources to find a female that will let me reproduce my genes. That's what our genes are driving us to do. And if you don't kind of go with that, it's something that you don't really have success with as a culture, as a person. If you're not focused on that, you won't have kids, you won't reproduce. That gene set that is more predisposed to thinking in that certain way where you need to focus on non-reproductive things will, in general, die out from the human gene set, and that kind of mindset, that kind of ideas, those kind of thought lines will not continue, will not perpetuate to the next generation. So yeah, why daughters Omumbi are hard not to crack. So, okay, this might be the rise of the Nyanjiru spirit. She was killed at the Central Police Station in 1922 when she fought for the release of Harithuku. So what I was saying with these names, some of the names you can kind of tell with the tribes and clans that are still there. You can tell from the names which tribes and people are from. So Wangare, Karua, Chege, I think these are Waiguru, names like these are Kikuyu names in general, where someone can be like, yes, I know this person's from that tribe. You don't even have to see the person's face. You just hear their name and people can tell this is from this tribe. And people still have a lot of cultural and ethnicity things with their tribes, different languages, different belief systems, different marital, kind of small little differences in who's married. Like in some cultures, some tribes, some clans, you have a bride price being paid. Some you'll have a dowry being paid where the female's paid. It's mostly bride price. And then different things are included, different kind of practices are done, who goes to whose home, when you come to the homestead, what needs to be done, etc. Just smaller things that kind of do some changes, but are very important to the people who actually partake in these things. So water everywhere, but not enough to drink in Mombasa. Same issue. Mombasa is a beach city. It's a city on the coast. Same issue you have in California where there's a massive coast and you have people like, yes, we have access to the ocean, but we don't have actual clean water. So having access to something is not the same as having quality of that thing. Same thing I was talking about with the healthcare thing. You can be living in a deserted island surrounded by water, but be thirsty. You have access to water, but this access to fluid care, access to fluid ingestion is not the same as access to good drinking water. Just how access to healthcare, universal access to healthcare, is not the same to being able to be as healthy as you possibly can in that entire situation. That's something that I think really bothers me, that people need to kind of talk about. So 5 hacked as row over Mwea's land escalates. So here, hacked, as you might be able to tell from this, they're talking about hacking here. They're not talking about people's phones being hacked. They're talking about actual, probably machetes going in and hacking people's bodies and things like that. So some gruesome stuff here. some really horrible things are happening in South Africa with this, with white farmers. And here it's a situation where this is just probably even the same tribes. I'm 100, almost 100%, 99.9% sure there's no white people involved in this. So this whole thing with the South Africa thing, one thing I'm saying, people saying it's a white genocide. I know they're targeting white Boer farmers at the point. They're not going to Cape Town and Johannesburg and hunting down white people in their offices, in their suburban neighborhoods there. They're targeting a certain group of people in the farmers, in those rural areas. They have a certain mentality of the people there. And you see that here. That's what I'm saying. Even once those white people, if the white people all left, if those Boer white farmers all left and transferred that land to someone else, it would continue. It's the mentality those people have. It's not necessarily race-based. It's convenient to use the race right now, but it shall continue in other ways, even without the race thing. So this is an internal magazine that they have in this one, Generation Next. It's talking about the different outfits that you have with these African kind of cloths. So this is kind of just like an insert, mostly for kids. I'm Kibaki's wife. Former MP for Odai, Mr. Winnie Wambui, talks about the back to school. Kibaki was a former president, so she was married to him for a while, or right now, or what? Yeah, I think they're still married. So she's using what? I'm his wife, so I don't know about this article. It was saying former president. So yeah, this is kind of situation where maybe she's using her original name anyway. But that's the former president of Kenya. He was the president before Uhuru Kenyatta. He was the third president of Kenya. So this is just an interior magazine, so just kind of flipping through here. Sex 101, 12 ways to revive a cyclist marriage. So you have the kind of same situations here, health tips, things like that. So this is kind of a similar kind of variety type interesting thing, too much road rage. Hey, actually flipping people off in this. I didn't think I would actually have that in this Kenyan magazine. I'm going to censor that somehow. Bacon, don't be talking bad about bacon. Bacon's amazing. I don't know how haram that is to have that in here. There's a big Muslim population. I don't know if they would rage out to see that in here. But I don't think they don't have as much activists here as they do in other places. Then you have this little section of cartoons. Radio Maisha, just different radio stations here. Here are some local music artists, Nameless, Kansol, Fina, Willie Pose. Now again, things like this, if you are interested in African culture, in seeing places where there's more people that look like you, if you're African American, if you're in the diaspora, if you're living in the West, you're like, oh, everything is targeted towards white people. How many ads have you seen in here featuring a white person? There was that one story in the front about the friend of the elephant, so the white lady, but everything else is black people. So if you think it's very important to have material made by people that look like you, and that's the important thing, go online, look up these names, look up Nameless, look up Kansol, look up Fena, look up Willie Pose, and see what kind of music they're making. See if you like that stuff, see if it speaks to you. And you'll see they also have taken influences from the West. Because I think with music and arts and things like that, I like how universal it is. This whole like, oh, we need black art, we need Asian music, we need Mexican, we need like, Latino food. Or is Latino even a race? It's just, anyway, these things, they really bug me. I'm like, why can't we just share these things and appropriate what's appropriate from the appropriate sources? So coming back here, Kahiga keeps promising a surprise deputy. A Facebook boss trying to get away in front of regulatory wave. I did a video on this. This is absurd. Again, we don't need the government, the state, to come in and regulate that. The state are the monopoly. That is the monopoly of monopolies. Pretty much they're like Facebook. Those things that we let you do before, you need to like stop doing that, but also tell us what you're doing so we can do it even better. No. Do not regulate it more. If anything, take off all the regulations you have for actually getting on those kind of platforms. Take out all regulations that you need to be something like Facebook, and the other smaller companies will be able to come in and have some competitive market. Even if Facebook wants to try and buy them out, there'll be eventually some people who say, no, you can't buy us out. We're going to actually try to do this. But right now, the costs of running a business like Facebook due to government regulation, due to state regulation, are so high that you have to have a really high level of income to actually enter these things. So it makes it very hard for some people to actually enter those fields. Anyway. So here's the business section, how electioneers sank listed firms into the red. So it's kind of a similar thing that you had the situation in United States of America with one Donald J. Trump here. Talking about his Twitter here. Al Jazeera English being quoted here. U.S. President says strikes suspected. Okay, so they're talking about the strikes, horrible strikes again. But here, the same thing they're talking about, Trump would crash the actual election because it would be horrible for the United States of America. Then the stock market fired up. But I also don't think you should be that excited about that because this might be a crash coming soon. But you have that situation where that was happening. Here in Kenya, there was actually a situation where the first round of the election was found not to be legal. Then they set it on another date to have another election, and then the opposition leader Raila Odinga was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm actually going to have my own people's... I'm not going to go up for the second round. I want to push to January. They said no. Uhuru Kenyatta went unopposed. He won it in. He won with like 2.3 to like 3 million votes. And there's 45 million people in Kenya, so there was worried, is he legitimate? Raila Odinga was continuing his saying, like, I'm the opposition president, I'm the people's president. He had his own people's inauguration and went in. And now the country was worried. People were wondering, is this actually going to happen? There's been previous elections in 2007 where there's a lot of actual violence. Over 2,000 people died. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced from different areas. So people were wondering, is that going to happen again? So in Africa, there's a lot of situations where during elections, it's the sign of unrest after you have... And it's hard to invest because around those times you can really crash the stock markets. People who are planning for long term, like these businesses, really get a tough time in it. And you see here in the business section. Relief for motorists as fuel prices reduce marginally. Now, like a liter of petrol, what they call it here, is about $1 in general. And a liter, you guys can figure out how much that is. I think a gallon is something like 3 liters or something. And in most places in Kenya I've gone to, you have people who actually pump your gas for you. Now you come with a minimum wage type thing. If you had a situation it's like $5 an hour to pay these people, you can't pay these people $5 an hour to pump gas. You just can't. So I don't know how much they get paid, but I doubt it's $5 an hour. I bet you get paid probably something like $20 a day for working like a 10-hour day. It's probably something like that. But it's still enough for them to actually make a living, and they actually have lots of people like that. There might be situations where there's actual differences, but I'm not sure. I would be very surprised if it's more than something like 2,000 shillings, which is about $20 a day. I'd be surprised. I can double check that, but probably won't. Huawei Youth, Eyes Youth with new series. A lot of different companies have come in. Tech companies are approaching African market with cheaper kind of technology because people aren't as set saying, oh, I have to have Apple, I have to have like Samsung, or these setup things. They kind of go with these different ones. Huawei is a different one. I think it's from Korea, South Korea, not North Korea, definitely not North Korea. It's from South Korea, and there's other ones. Techmo is another company that comes in here. So you have different things coming in here. How China could soon overtake US as the largest global economic power. So that's a lot of interest, a lot of connections and partnerships with Asia and Africa. I think there's a military base being set up somewhere in Western Africa by China. So that's worrying people. That's a big story here in Africa, in Kenya. So here are a few more business sections. Here, a world section. I'm going to have an upcoming video coming up about knowledge about local people in other countries have about other countries. And I think there's a kind of a hierarchy thing. If you're number 50 in the country, in general, in the world, you're going to know more, your people are going to know more about the top 5 countries than the people in the top 5 countries are going to know about the number 50 country. That's just a general thing in anything. If I'm an athlete and I'm trying to get into a league and there's top 5 players in that league and I'm number 500 and I'm trying to become the top 5, I'm going to look at what that top 5 player is doing and try to see what I can learn from them. Now, the same thing, that top 5 player is not going to look at me and say, hey, that number 500 guy, how's he 500? He might look at me and see a few things and be like, hey, let me avoid doing what 500 is doing, but he's not going to try to understand my workout program and understand how I study tape, how I practice, how I prepare for games. He's not going to care about that. He's going to keep doing what he's doing. So that's just one thing I was kind of thinking about that. But there's world news, and I think talking about the wars. So a lot of the same things that you see out there in the world are the same things you see here. Some of the things are definitely here centralized to Africa. Winnie's daughter fiercely defends her, calls media hypocrites. So I don't know, it's got the fist up in the air in the hand. So I don't know if that's appropriation from the African American culture or did it start somewhere in Africa? I don't know. What do you African Americans think? What do you black people think? Is she appropriating the fist up in the air? So yeah, massive event. Laying to rest, it's being held at the stadium here. Winnie Mandela at age 80 is what she looked like. But yeah, so UN chief lauds freedom fighter as a towering figure against apartheid. So yes, people are multifaceted. She did play a part in the apartheid thing, and yeah, I'm supportive of that, but she also did some really horrible things. And she was also a communist. I despise communists. Code word. I think I'm going to do these later. I haven't done these in a while. If there's a Sudoku here, I really like Sudoku. No Sudoku! Sudoku! No Sudoku. There's some Sudoku sometimes. But yeah, now you have the classifieds. You have some ads here. A lot of people still get a lot of information here. The classifieds used to be a lot bigger, but now they've gone online. They have gone things on cellular. You can get things sent to you. A lot of people have access to phones. Then you have the athletes things here. Semenya, who was with her wife. Okay, Semenya was this person who did a trans thing. She's a transsexual person who competes against women and destroys the women because biologically male. I talked about this in a recent video. You are born male. You just are male regardless. You can behave like a man. The actions you do are manly. And then you act like a man. You have certain responsibilities as a man in a culture, in a society. And then also in that culture and society, there's behavioral patterns that are masculine. So you can say, yes, this female is taking on a masculine role by being a certain way, by behaving in a certain aggressive way. Yet a female's, in general, the feminine role in general, is being more demure and having soft power versus more of the aggressive physical power. You know, they'll talk more and things, they'll use their words more than their actual like physical presence. And you have also like a feminine and masculine thing could be appearance. That is a masculine outfit. This is a feminine outfit in the culture. This is a biological male, it's a biological female. Acting in the relationship wise, that is the role of the man in a marriage, in a relationship. She's playing the role of the female. Now, both these people, you can switch them over. It could be both females biologically, those man and masculine, man and masculine, and female and woman and feminine things will still stick as they are. But anyway, the gender riddle rumbles on. And this guy Turd Flinging Monk, he has a really funny channel, but he's talking about this thing where he says he is lesbian, transgender, male presenting. No, he's a transgender, male presenting lesbian. So he's a man, but because he's transgender, but he presents like a male, and then he's a lesbian. No, sorry, let's come back to this. Sorry, he's a female, transgender, male presenting lesbian. So he's actually biological female, but he transitioned into a male, and then he presents himself as a male, and he's a lesbian, so he likes females, or something like that. So he's talking about how you can get around this whole like middle thing to say, oh yeah, you have to behave this way, so that way you can get all the protection from all the social justice warrior nonsense. So this coming up, he's just completely destroying people. Yeah, so he's completely, you can see here, just ahead of the field, this is a dude. Even in the relationship, this dude is apparently a lesbian because she's transitioned to a female. So there's this, the Semenya situation is something that's a bit clownish for me. But yeah, Gerard, people love football here. Love football. In general, when it comes to sports, love football even more than track, because track doesn't have a regular season. I mean, people do watch some of the other seasonal things besides the Commonwealth Games, the Olympics, the international big organizations. But one thing that's coming up is rugby. That's another thing that's coming up. The rugby team is pretty solid here in Kenya. It does pretty decently in the international circuit, but people love football, mostly the Premiership, which is the league in Britain, United Kingdom. Racing is kind of a thing that comes up too. You'll see it being played at sports bars. The Commonwealth Games are going on, and Kenya is, of course, killing it on the running, as usual. The distance runners, that's what they do. So yeah, and last page, world champs show their class. So yes, surprise, surprise, killing it on the long distance. Again, these are certain tribes, and normally the best at this. I don't know if we can check some of the names here, as I was saying before. Chelimo, Chespol, Chepkoech. You can see here the Che. That's a signifier of a certain tribe. The key is also a big one. Wambui, that's I think it's a different one. So you can see with the names, there's certain things where you can tell, again, just from the name. When it starts with a key, you normally know what tribe that is. Kipruto, Kinyamal. So yeah, this is kind of things where you can kind of just tell. But this is also the same thing. When it comes to this tradition, the people who have the pride in the country, when these different tribes win, they kind of come together and like, yes, we can be united in this. And I think sports, music, some of these entertainment fields, they kind of unite people. And I think that's why there's some frustration in the United States of America with sporting fields being infiltrated, the sporting fields and entertainment being infiltrated by more social justice warrior activism type things when they're talking about, hey, These were things for us to kind of ignore. I personally, as you can tell from the things I've been talking here, if you're watching my channel, I think politics are everywhere. I think it's more preferential to actually talk and know about this and see where it is in other places. I'd rather know somebody's politics, and I can still put that aside in most cases and be like, yeah, I'll still watch you play and do things like this. But I do understand it kind of brings people together. When it comes to voting, people will vote on tribal lines, but when it comes to celebrating the sports, people will celebrate and be happy for the people. They won't think, oh, that person's Kalenjin, so I'm not going to celebrate for them. There might be some people out there who might, but I don't think it's really that big of a thing. But yeah, that's it. So that's it. It was a bit longer than the other ones. I think it was a bit longer. It was like 40 minutes or something. But I think I preferred this. I liked actually going through and reading it. Let me know what you guys think if you've seen the other videos where I kind of just went through the headlines of two different ones versus just going through one and going through the different ones. Wanted you guys to see kind of the full kind of newspaper experience here in Nairobi, Kenya. If nobody puts up an actual preference to having the headlines only, I think next weekend I'll probably try to read the Sunday Nation and see what kind of material is in there and see if it's comparative to this one. And as I mentioned before, if you actually like what you saw in this, if you see an article in there that you want me to read and go more into, write it down in the comment section and I'll try to get to that probably around Thursday. If I haven't heard anything by Thursday, I'm not going to do it and just move on to the next one unless there's something I find that's interesting, which you probably want. A lot of other videos and things that I'd like to get done this week. But yeah, so like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store. If you guys like this channel and want to help support me, there's a Patreon as well. You can help out in there. And there's different kind of tiers and different things. I can draw something for you if you really like it. If you give me even just like $1 or $2, anything will help. But yeah, that was Silas, Sunday over here, Nairobi, Kenya. Goodbye.